Oh my goodness. 30 seconds in, we already have a technical difficulty with the mute function, but we're back right here. Welcome back. Welcome in. 30 seconds gone. That's not rapid. We're going to get rapid right now. Give me a follow at FF the At Home Dad. Give the show a follow at the Fantasy Facts. Give Fantasy Data a follow at Fantasy Data NFL because they're the ones that I get all these beautiful numbers from, all the beautiful graphics I come up with. Right now, we're going to hit the full week 13 slate. Let's go. Kicks off tonight with a fantastic game. Buffalo versus New England, an interdivisional matchup. I I don't see how Buffalo loses this game. New England comes in a little bit beat up. The one fantasy bright spot for New England right now is Ramondre Stevenson. He would have to have an absolutely phenomenal game against, granted, a beat up Buffalo defense, but a defense that is pretty good on paper. I really like Ramondre in this matchup, and I don't really like anybody else here. Mac Jones is a very sittable quarterback in just about every format. Obviously, if you're in a super flex or have to start two, yes, you're going to play him over pretty much any positional guy. But um, his main target, Jacoby Myers, dealing with a shoulder injury. He said last week that it wasn't a long term injury, but he did seem hampered by it in the last game and is still questionable at the moment. And then outside of that, I don't really like much in this New England receiver core or backfield. Damian Harris is out for tonight's game, so again, fire up Ramondre Stevenson. He needs to be the focal point of this matchup, and he's going to be the focal point that either is going to win you the matchup, or win the matchup in general because he is just getting force fed the ball. There's really not much else that they're going to be able to put in place to kind of beat the Buffalo Bills. On the Bills side of the ball, you can fire up just about everybody in this matchup. You are going to be playing Josh Allen no matter what because he's Josh Allen. You're going to be playing Stephon Diggs for the same reason because he's Stephon Diggs. You can probably sprinkle in some Gabe Davis and Isaiah McKenzie depending on how creative you need to be with your lineup. They are not must starts, in my opinion. There's definitely guys that you can play above them. And then Devin Singletary pulls a halfway decent matchup in this game as well. I don't mind it. The over under here isn't fantastic. And I think part of that is just because we don't really expect this game to turn into a blowout type of game. But I could definitely see Buffalo covering the 3.5 spread that they have currently. Next up on the list, we have the Steelers, who have been playing pretty decent as of late, traveling to take on Atlanta, which again, this is a game with a relatively low over under only at 42 points, but a game that I think you can take some fantasy points away from. With that, you're probably not playing either of these quarterbacks unless you need to. Marcus Mariota, he gets lifted because of his rushing ability, and so does Kenny Pickett to an extent. Kenny Pickett has been able to have some decent games rushing, but neither of them are quarterbacks that you want to rely on their passing acumen, and neither of these opportunities are going to give you much in terms of super high upside. Yes, there's a potential for breakaways, but you're probably not going to get a ton out of it. I I don't mind starting Deontay Johnson in terms of volume. I don't mind starting George Pickens in terms of big playability. Neither one of them are must starts, though. They're very good flex opportunities on Pittsburgh. Pat Fryermuth has become the security blanket, the check down guy for Kenny Pickett. I like that play at the tight end spot. Um, but other than that, Najee Harris is dealing with a knee injury. That is definitely something that you want to keep in mind. This could be a defense to take advantage for Najee Harris, but man, that becomes really tough because of this knee irritation that he's dealing with, which now opens the door for, is it going to be Jalen Warren coming back from his hamstring injury, which looks like it could happen, but again, is something that you want to keep a very close eye on. Benny Snell looked good in following up, but was he looking good only because of the opportunity with Jalen Warren not there? And Anthony McFarland also had a couple of decent runs last week as well. But again, is this just because of the matchup that they had, or do we see more Benny Snell moving forward? He was a prospect. If you go back numerous drafts, he was a prospect that people made a little bit of noise for. So again, this is an opportunity to maybe bolster your running back stable with, but could also be an opportunity where you just waste some waiver fab or a waiver priority trying to get those guys. At this point of the year, though, it's worth the waste because if they do get some opportunity, you're making your playoff push. You're making hopefully a run in the playoffs, and that makes it completely worth it. For Atlanta, you're probably going to roll out Cordarrelle Patterson, even though he hasn't been the RB1 type of caliber player that he has been over the past really like 16 months. Back to last year, as long as he's been healthy, he's had that opportunity. It's getting a little bit harder to play him, but in this matchup, there's Kyle Pitts hasn't been there. Drake London hasn't been able to fully explode onto the scene. Yes, there's going to be some backfield splits here with Tyler Algier, but I think you could start Cordarrelle Patterson in a flex. Maybe I'm not excited about him as an RB2, but I definitely like him as a flexible position. His role in this offense should keep him into that situation. And first time fantasy player, welcome Johnny D as a first time fantasy player. Glad you're joining us. Everyone in my league is 6-6. I have one of those leagues also, pretty much. Is that even fun? No clear winners each week. I actually find that to be one of the most competitive leagues is when everybody's at 6-6. Hopefully it's because everyone's competing. Those teams are pretty balanced. You're hopefully getting an opportunity to, distance yourself if you're able to play the waiver game. That's like I was just mentioning with this Pittsburgh backfield. Maybe that's your opportunity to kind of break away from that 6-6. There's a few other spots for that to happen. As we're about to see in a few more games as well, especially when we get to it's weird. Maybe one of my favorite games of the week is Jacksonville, Detroit, but that's in 2 games. Next up is Green Bay and Chicago. Green Bay and Chicago. Oh, man, this is a game I am not excited to watch, though. Hopefully, we get Justin Fields back. It looks like he is trending in that direction. He was a limited participant this past Wednesday. So that does bode well for him. But what you're missing though is you're missing Darnell Mooney. You're missing a lot of the upside. And Green Bay's defense has just been Jekyll and Hyde. They've let up plays. They've been beaten. They've been beaten certain ways, but then they've been staunch in other ways. And it's kind of difficult to figure out what you're going to get with this Green Bay game in any given week. It seems like you could get a Green Bay team that's ready to roll and they're doing fine, and then a Green Bay team that gets just annihilated by the Jets at home. So a lot of different ways that this game could go. If Fields is healthy, you are playing him just because of the upside he has in that rushing game. David Montgomery, I don't mind him as an RB2. Again, this is because he's going to get plenty of volume here. Outside of that, you may start Cole Kmet, you may start Chase Claypool, but it is extremely difficult to start any of these guys with any type of confidence, given their makeup. And let's see. If we keep going down the list here, not really much out there. Maybe the Equanimous or somebody like that. But again, you're not starting any of those guys with any type of confidence. Aaron Rodgers, on the other hand, again, the confidence piece there, it looks like it's starting to come together for him. This is the matchup to play Aaron Rodgers. If you have him, Chicago has been beat just about every way possible. Their defense has been just Swiss cheese. So Aaron Rodgers should be able to take advantage of it. Aaron Jones should be able to take advantage of it. Christian Watson should be able to take advantage of it. AJ Dillon is finally getting back into the mix. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I don't mind it if you are desperate. Again, there is some desperation that is happening, especially right now with a bunch of injuries still going on. but I don't mind throwing AJ Dillon in as a flex. Again, I don't want him to be an RB2, but as an RB3 or as a second flex, I feel a lot more confident throwing AJ Dillon into that. Same thing with Alan Lazard. I don't mind throwing him in there. He should get plenty of receptions if you're playing in a PPR league. He is the second most. The second most projected skill player in this Green Bay offense, most likely because of that reception upside that he has. However, Christian Watson, I'm going to keep rolling Christian Watson out there until I don't know. I don't know if there's an until in that statement. Just because he has the ability to get such big plays. Now, I'm not expecting him to get multiple touchdowns each week. I'm not expecting him to get a long touchdown every week, but I'm going to keep rolling him out there because he has that potential. And if I can, again, roll him out there in a flex spot where that upside becomes even more valuable, I'm definitely throwing Christian Watson into that situation. I'm not going to play a guy like Tanyan. Probably not going to play a guy like Cobb or anything else like that. It's really at that top where you're gonna make your bank. And like I said, this is the game to roll out those Green Bay players because Chicago's defense is just kind of terrible. All right, next up, like I said, this could be one of it's kind of gross to say, but could be one of my favorite games of the week. And that's Detroit and Jacksonville. It has the second highest over under of the week. They're expected to be able both teams are expected to put up over 25 points when you look at implied point totals. And the spread is only 1 point in favor of Jacksonville. Now, I don't I don't know what's going to happen in this game, and I think that's why it makes it fun because there's just so many different ways that this game could go. This is one of those games where, in terms of fantasy projections, there's not a ton they're doing compared to some other teams out there where their teams are projected in the 70s. This Jacksonville and Detroit are both projected in the 90s. I think you can really highlight this game as one of those DFS plays to start mixing in a whole bunch of different guys that should be relatively cheap moving forward. We're going to I see you in there. I'm going to throw your comment up in just a minute. I'm going to finish out the Jacksonville Detroit thing, and then I'm going to jump into that game. All right. So Jacksonville, I think you can start Trevor Lawrence pretty confidently at this point. I think you can start Christian Kirk pretty confidently. Travis Etienne becomes the big question mark. The rumor is that he was able to jump back into the game, but didn't jump into the game, which is kind of interesting because it went to overtime. It's going to be something you're really going to want to follow. Hopefully, if on waivers you're able to pick up Hasty, if he's still out there on waivers, go ahead and scoop him up if you have room. Give yourself that little bit of security blanket, especially if you have ETN or if you're in the running back desperate mode. Which again, I can't say it enough. Almost everybody's in that mode right now. But I think you can start both Kirk and Zay Jones in this matchup and feel pretty good about it. If ETN can't go, I think you can also throw Hasty in there as, again, another flex play. Not a guy I really want into my top two running back starting positions, but Hasty is a guy that I enjoyed watching in the scouting process. So I wouldn't mind throwing him in. He's been productive when he's been given opportunities to be productive. So I don't mind throwing him into a starting lineup if we get news that ETN isn't going to be able to go. But it does seem like it's trending towards ETN getting that go. Definitely keep an eye on that. On the Detroit side, Amon-Ra is your top projected player with 17.69 fantasy points. Really like that for him. I love Amon-Ra St. Brown in this matchup. I don't mind Goff in this matchup either. Again, Jacksonville can be beat. The one thing that I think is going to be difficult in this matchup is Jacksonville has a pretty solid defensive line. They really worked on building that defense and part of the offense as well. Not so much the offense, but they really went after slot receivers in the offseason. But they really focused on the line on that defensive side of the ball, which makes things a little bit interesting for Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift. I I'm probably gonna be rolling them out there, but definitely in that back end RB2 type of situation. It's gonna be again curious to see what that split is. It's always curious to see what that split is. But Jamal Williams seems to be that goal line back, which edges a little bit towards Williams as my starter. If you have both of them, God bless you. It's probably been difficult. You've probably been pulling your hair out the entire season. But if you have both of them, I would probably lean starting Jamal over DeAndre in this particular matchup. And then outside of that, like if you have a Shark or Khalif Raymond, Josh Reynolds, any of that type of guys, you're probably not really throwing them in there. Brock White becomes an interesting play at tight end, but only because of surely he could fall into the end zone type of DFS play if you want to sprinkle in and just get a little bit more out of this, what should be high scoring offensive game. All right. So then for my man Blurpy here, you think Mike Evans bounces back? His expected fantasy points last week was 20, but ended up having a bad fantasy week. I do think he's should be able to bounce back, and part of the reason he should be able to bounce back is in this Monday night game. Hopefully, we get a fully healthy Tampa offense out there. It will be interesting to see what they do with Tristan Wirfs. That's the big highlight of this Monday night game. We're jumping ahead, but that's what we do for the fans. Um, it'll definitely something you want to keep an eye on is the health of this team. Tristan Wirfs had a quote gruesome knee injury. I haven't been able to find any video of it. Not sure if I want to watch it. If it is there, but he has really been coming into his own on that offensive line. So it'll be interesting to see what we're able to get. New Orleans defense has the capabilities to be a good defense. They have had some games where they've been able to live up to expectations. They have some games where they've really let some things go. The big question to me is Brady, Godwin, Evans. What's that setup going to look like? I like Mike Evans to have the potential to bounce back in this game. He's projected right now at 13 on fantasy data, which is a lot higher than the 20 that you were looking at before. But I don't mind rolling out Mike Evans here as a wide receiver 2. I think there should be points scored in this game. The over under is a little low, I feel like, at only 40. I think this game could supersede that 40. I think we do get a mix of Rashad White and Leonard Fournette. Let me go down. And actually, I don't think there hasn't really been any injury news because I remember looking at this game ahead of time. There really hasn't been any new injury news coming out of either of these two teams. But Fournette had been dealing with a little bit of an injury. So that'll be something to pay attention to as we get a little bit further along. But I don't mind having Mike Evans. Now, you should be starting him in your flex position because it is a Monday night game, but I don't mind putting Mike Evans in and expecting him to score as a wide receiver 2, hopefully finding the end zone against New Orleans. On the flip side of the ball, you have Alvin Kamara, who is very similar situation, has had some letdown games, but should be able to come back again against the Tampa Bay defense. That front line usually is pretty staunch, but has let up a decent amount of points. I am in absolute love with Chris Olave. I think he is a must start wherever you can roll him out. Again, that's in your flex position because it's a Monday night game, but expecting him to score essentially on your team as your wide receiver 3, if not better. And then Andy Dalton is Andy Dalton and is not a player that you're going to want to start unless you are in dire need of starting him. And then outside of that, you're probably not rolling out any of those other guys in there. Now, a couple more questions thrown in there. Wide receivers are Amon-Ra, D-Hop, Evans, and Judy. More concerned for the playoffs than next week. Yeah, Amon-Ra, just mentioned him. Big fan. I think he's going to be just fine. D-Hop is a reception machine. Absolutely fine. And then I'm probably rolling out Evans over Judy in almost every situation there just because that Denver offense has been abysmal. It's almost impossible to play Judy with any type of um, any type of like hope that he's going to get into the end zone. They've been so terrible. So those would be my three starting wide receivers out there. You're probably not going to get any wide receivers off the waiver, but check it out, see if it's there. But yeah, I would be rolling those three out pretty much through however far you go in the playoffs, which I hope is really really far. Um, and yep, Kamar has a good matchup schedule for the fantasy playoffs. Totally agree. I think you're probably going to end up with another game here where Kamara might disappoint you, but it'd be really difficult to find a spot to find a guy to replace Kamara with that you're like ahead of time, like, yep, I feel good about this. It's more the man, I don't like it, but I think Kamara is going to underperform, and I think Jamal Williams is going to get into the end zone, and even that one, I feel like that's like I wouldn't do that in any of my lineups unless I was like, you know what, if Alvin Kamara just completely bombs on me, like I'm going to be in a worse situation. There's really not many options where I would sit a guy of Kamara's caliber, even in a matchup like this. Blurpy, I hope that was helpful. Make sure you give me a follow, give the show a follow, throw us a thumbs up in there, whatever you want to do. Appreciate you sticking with us. Joe, welcome back, Joe. Fan of the show. Fan of the show, Joe. Start Watson or Jimmy G? Oof. First, I'm gonna just say yes, go Cowboys. Love that. Man, that is tough. Let's since we're skipping all over the place, let's go ahead and jump to that Cleveland game. Cleveland and Houston. That is such a perfect matchup for Watson. You can't ask for a better opportunity to come back than playing a team that is as bad as Houston. Now, that being said, he has been away from football for almost 200 years. I think the count was like 700 days or something like that, which is a lot. I I think this is a game where we are going to see Houston get pretty much demolished, but we're going to see Watson kick the rust off, right? This is a kick the tires type of situation. He is, by all accounts, it looks like he's going to play. I don't see why he wouldn't play right now, but I definitely see Watson um, being a very average quarterback, which Jimmy G is a pretty average quarterback also. I would say though, I would probably lean Jimmy G right now. And that's a safety bet versus an upside bet. So depending on what you need, Joe, I think that's a little bit of where I would be thinking if I need like, hey, I need 15-ish 20 points, and Jimmy G, I want to say, let me actually pull up that game. I'll talk about that one next. Um, I want to say he's probably going to be projected on fantasy data for around 15 points. 16.11 is what Jimmy's projected for. Watson is projected for 16.9. I would lean Jimmy G for safety. I think he gets you at least 15 points. I think there's a little bit of upside there because that Miami team can definitely score. The question is, can San Fran score to keep up with it? San Fran's defense is also really solid, so it'll be interesting to see if they're able to slow down Miami any. And then Watson, like I said, that's your upside play. Like if you need an over the top like moonshot in order to win this week, then I roll out Watson. But otherwise, I'd probably sit him. I want to see what happens. Don't read too much into Cleveland destroying Houston because I think it's going to happen. Nick Chubb is projected at 17 points. I am hammering that all day long. I think he's definitely going to get there. Watson is probably, I think they're going to be safe with him. I think he might be either right around or a little bit under that like 16, 15 quarterback point kind of mark, which I think slows down Cooper and Peoples Jones a little bit. And Joku is on the injury report. So you definitely want to keep an eye on that. But I would say that's probably where we're going to go there. No, thank you, Joe. I hope that really answered your question. And then I'm just going to finish out with this game. Johnny D, I do see you in here. I'm going to check on your question in just a minute. Let me finish rounding out this Cleveland Houston game, though. So Donovan Peoples Jones and Joku Cooper, they're going to get hurt a little bit, I feel like, because this is going to be a Nick Chubb game. We might actually get some Kareem Hunt work mixed in a little bit more into this as well. But again, I don't see this being much of a passing game. Damian Pierce has been a ghost the past few weeks, so he's a flex play for me at this point. I was all over Damian Pierce at the beginning of the season, so excited to see him get going. Now this offense just looks like it's completely stuck in the mud, and it's completely stuck in the mud to the point where they can't get anything going. Yes, Cleveland can get taken advantage of, so that does make Pierce a an upside flex play for me, but he's not a guy where uh in the middle of the season he was a guy where you could throw him into your starting two running back lineup and feel absolutely fine about it. He is not that anymore. Kyle Allen is not the one. Houston, neither is Davis Mills, but not the one, which means that you have Cooks, Collins, their wide receiver threes, wide receiver fours. Cooks has a little bit of an edge. Collins has a little bit in terms of receptions. Cooks definitely has the upside. But again, these are guys where if you had Cooper, I'm starting Cooper over either of them. And if I'm in the flex, I'm strongly debating a guy like DPJ versus a guy like Nico Collins, just because DPJ has a little bit more upside, especially with the weak defense of Houston. So that's definitely something to keep in mind as you're going through that. All right. Johnny D saying thanks. Wish I was in more leagues. If you want to be in more leagues, get out there, get in more leagues. Just know, go slow, because like I talked about it in some of the other podcasts. I hit 18 managed leagues this year, and that's when I learned my limit is somewhere between 15 and 18 managed leagues, because it was just too much for me this year. I was just doing way too many things. But yes, get in there slow, jump in there. It is a great, great time. I highly, 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 highly recommend it. And then also, would you say it's better to play studs versus playing a player with better matchup? Jamal Williams and James Conner as RB2, CMC is my RB1. Seems like I play one while the other plays better. You are falling into the classic trap of fantasy football and really just any type of decision remorse, right? You could go through the drive through and be like, yeah, I want a Big Mac, and then see somebody walk by with a chicken sandwich and be like, man, should have went with that chicken sandwich. But what I typically go with, is I typically roll with the studs unless the matchup is so good, or unless there's something else that I always want to have a rationale that I can fall back on. Because one, luck happens, right? And then two, I want to be able to go back and say, well, why did I play that guy? Did I play him just because it was a good matchup? Like, am I going to play Deshaun Watson just because he's playing against Houston and not pay attention to the fact that he hasn't played in so long? Not pay attention to the fact that they have, if not the best, one of the best pure runners in all of football, and Nick Chubb, right? So I always kind of want to fall back to those things. Thank you for the help, though. James Conner is on bye this week. Arizona and Carolina are on bye this week. So that should make your decision a whole lot easier. You're going to be playing CMC. Pay attention for the knee injury, though, and we'll actually jump into that San Fran Miami game next. You're going to be playing CMC, even with like any type of setup, any type of matchup concerns. You're going to be rolling CMC out there just because he has such potential to be that superstar. You always roll him out there. And then Jamal Williams, you're going to be rolling him out there as well because Connor's going to be out. But I actually like Jamal Williams to find the end zone in this matchup at least once. Does he have a 3-touchdown day? I kind of doubt that, but I could definitely see Jamal Williams finding the end zone at least once in this Jacksonville game. All right. Now, thanks for the segue. Hope you enjoyed that as well. Moving into the Miami San Fran game. Man, I need like a highlighter to cross all these games off because they're jumping all over the place, but that's all right. Miami San Fran, talked about it a little bit. Miami can score, but they're going up against San Fran, who is if not I should have pulled the stats. They are like top 5 in just about all of the shut down the offense type of categories: yards per game, scoring per game. I think it was yards per rushing attempt. All of those things really, San Fran is shutting them down. They're a really solid defense. But I think you are still going to roll out guys like Tyreek Hill, who's projected at 19.91 points this week. You're definitely going to roll him out there. You're going to play Tua. You're going to play Waddle. The question becomes Jeff Wilson. Is he startable or not? Where do you start? Where do you pencil him into your lineup? For me, again, happier with the flex play, but I think he can be. I think this is one of those situations where you can kind of hold him out of your lineup if you have that ability, right? And it's going to depend on who those other flex players are for you. But I think you can hold them out because it does look like Mostert's going to come back in. Now, again, they kind of went back and forth, and that's just going to limit their fantasy production. I'm not saying I'm going to roll Mostert out there, Raheem Mostert, instead of Jeff Wilson. I'm not saying that. I think it's still Jeff Wilson's lead role, but I do think that we're in a spot where they can damage themselves by both being fully healthy in terms of fantasy, in terms of actual play on the field. The more healthy running backs you have, the better. All right. And let me move over here real quick where I have the injury updates going for me. And just wanted to double check real quick. Yeah, Mostert was limited practice on Wednesday. Keep an eye on that as we move forward. Jimmy Garoppolo was a full participant. Christian McCaffrey didn't practice. It could just be a veteran type of day, but he did have a little bit of soreness after after last week's game. Debo was a limited participant as well, so something to keep in mind. And remember, Elijah Mitchell is out. He's probably out for pretty. It sounds like all of the fantasy season. I want to say it was something like 5 to 6 weeks or something like that for Elijah Mitchell. So definitely not going to be on your radar there. CMC projected at 18 points. Definitely a guy to throw in there. Debo Samuel has been very disappointing, but I think, again, he's a guy that probably is going to stay in your lineup. Ayuk has been doing better fantasy wise, but I think that's really a role construction type of thing. And Kittle has been coming on as well. I think you can really play all of them against a Miami defense that's gotten a little bit better, but it's still a defense that is going to give up points. And then on the Miami side, Hill, Tua, Waddle, expect them to have a phenomenal day. I'm not excited about Wilson and Mostert. And Joe throwing in the next question, Pollard over Wilson. I think I'm leaning Pollard on this one for two reasons, and we'll jump into a Sunday night game, even though we haven't hit all the 1 o'clock. So we're just gonna jump right into it. I think I'm gonna go with Dallas is going to eviscerate Indianapolis. They can't move the ball. If Indy plays at all like they played, goodness, whatever night that was, what was that? Was that Monday night? It was god awful. They could not move the ball. They couldn't throw the ball down the field. It was terrible. The Dallas defense is going to force Matt Ryan to seriously consider retirement. And I'm all for it. Not him retiring, but all for that defense really showing up. I think Dallas is going to completely take care of business here, which to me would lean to Pollard getting a few more reps. Pollard could definitely take advantage of this defense in Indy that really has just been kind of all over the place. Again, it's one of those defenses that on paper looks like it should be good. At times they again play up to that expectation, and then other times just get completely taken advantage of. Jeff Saturday does seem to have this team playing a bit harder, but this is a team that, again, I think Dallas is going to completely take care of business on Sunday night. I expect Zeke to get into the end zone. Zeke has a 10-point projection. Tony Pollard is projected at 13. I think Pollard gets into the end zone. I think Zeke gets into the end zone, which to me is why I would play them over Jeff Wilson, even though the matchups are probably pretty close to the same. I'd have to do a little more digging to see exactly what the fantasy points allowed and stuff like that would be. But I like Pollard. I like Zeke. I like Dak. I like CeeDee Lamb. Dalton Schultz is a must start if you have him at tight end. Finally coming into his own, putting up points, got to get him into the lineup. Gallup, I want to say he was dealing with a bit of a knee injury that you want to go ahead and um, keep an eye out for. Um, Let me just double check that real quick. Um, yeah, he did not practice on Wednesday. Other than that, the team looks really healthy. Trayvon Diggs also didn't practice. You want to keep an eye on that, see what's going on there. But then for the Colts, looks like pretty much a healthy team. Jelani Woods, who had a really nice game, didn't practice, but we'll see what goes on there. There is not much to play on this Colts team except for Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman. It becomes almost impossible to start Matt Ryan with um, any type of confidence. It's gross. Paris Campbell, he had some games here and there. He has the ability to break out, but it is tough to roll him in there. Same thing with Alec Pierce, Jelani Woods, Mo Ali Cox. Those are all guys that, yeah, they had games where you can look to and go like, hey, well, if he does that again, that's worth throwing into my lineup. I just don't see Indy really being able to move the ball much against this Cowboys defense. And if they do move it, it's going to be through the legs of Jonathan Taylor, and it's going to be Michael Pittman being that guy. There's not much out there that I see in this Colts offense that I'm going to be attacking in any way, shape, or form. All right. Now to try and figure out where we left off. We didn't talk about the Jets and Vikings game yet, so we're going to go there next. Back to the 1 o'clock games. So Jets and Minnesota. This is a game with playoff implications. Both of these teams are on the path to the playoffs. Mike White had himself a phenomenal game against the Bears. Let's throw that out there. It was against the Bears. A lot of what I'm about to say about the Jets right now is with the mindset against the Bears. Like I mentioned in the Bears breakdown just a bit ago, that defense is quite possibly the most favorable to all fantasy positions. So keep that in mind. Mike White had a phenomenal game. Do I expect it to stand up against this Minnesota defense, which has been good. Like, I mean, the fact that Minnesota has won so many games, that defense has to be doing a few things right, right? Um, so Mike White, he's the highest projected point scorer here at 13.71. Not something you want to see with quarterbacks. You typically want to see them in that 15 plus range. I'm not pulling the trigger on Mike White in a lineup unless I'm super desperate in a super flex league. Otherwise, I'm sure I can find some other option that I can roll with. That being said, I am excited for the potential of Garrett Wilson and Elijah Mitchell, or sorry, not Elijah Mitchell, the other Elijah Moore. I'm excited about his potential, especially with what they were able to do to that Bears defense. Granted, again, terrible defense, but the fact that both of them were able to move in that right direction, you're hoping to see more of that continue. Now, the big question mark is whether or not Michael Carter is out for this week. He is listed as questionable. I'm going to pull it up right now, whether or not he played this on Wednesday, not played, but practiced on Wednesday. And he did not practice on Wednesday. So that is opening the door for Bam Knight to take off. Here's a sneaky little DFS play that I'm thinking of, though, is Ty Johnson. Ty Johnson has been the Jets' backup running back for much, much longer than Bam Knight. Now, I really liked what Bam threw out there for everybody to watch in that last week's game, but I fully expect Ty Johnson to be involved. Fantasy data right now has his projection at 4.59. I think he completely supersedes that or goes past that amount. If not based solely on receptions and other work that he's going to get, I do not think this is going to be a full on Zonovan Knight show. I definitely like where Ty can go in this setup. So sneaky little DFS play is probably going to be pretty cheap, but like that opportunity there. On the flip side, I can't imagine anybody sitting Justin Jefferson for any way, shape, or form. It just would make absolutely no sense. He is an auto start at the wide receiver position. Christian Kirk, Kirk Cousins. Man, I'm mixing up everybody's names that are even close today. Kirk Cousins, on the other hand, he's a guy that, start Kirk Cousins, Watson, or Jimmy G. Probably going to start Cousins. Even though the Jets defense has a lot more going for them, I would say, than the other opposing defenses, aside from, well, yeah, I was going to say aside from Houston, but Houston's the one you want to take advantage of. But I'm probably rolling Kirk Cousins out, if only for that connection with Justin Jefferson. You can probably expect him to get at least a touchdown, maybe two. And Hawkinson has really come into his own. He becomes, I would say, a must start at the tight end position, especially with other injuries at that position. And Cook is an auto start at running back. And Thielen, he just sticks around. Like, as much as I am ready to completely write him off and move past him, he's sticking around. He's a guy that play in a pinch. He's a guy that you can work into a couple of lineups to get you a decent little floor. Again, not excited about him. I'm fully ready to move past the Thielen age of fantasy football, but he's still there. We'll keep rocking with him. Staying in New York, we're going to go with the New York Giants, taking on the Washington Commanders. Giants at home. I like the Giants here. This game has an over-under of only 40, not a ton of points being scored. And Washington is getting favored to win this game. I like the Giants as underdogs in this game. I don't think they need the points. I think the Giants can just flat out beat the Redskins at home. I I I I I don't think that's that hot of a take, but there it is. Giants at home beating the Commanders. I do not believe in Tyler Haneke. I don't believe in him in real life, even though he is a leader of men. He's doing a good job. I think this Giants defense is going to be able to attack him and attack this Washington offense. Terry McLaurin is your highest projected scorer on the Commanders at 13. He has had some really up and down games, and more downs stick into my mind than those up games. But he is a guy that you're probably throwing into a lineup simply because he does have that most potential. And if Washington is going to beat the Giants, it's probably going to be partially through the air with Terry McLaurin leading the way. The other option there is Antonio Gibson, getting him in space and then having the Giants defense have to chase. Joe, yes, I think they got back 3 offensive linemen. You talking about the Giants there? Not sure who you're talking about there, Joe. Go ahead, throw us another comment in there. Let us know which one you're talking about. But I do see Gibson being able to get into space, get some opportunities there. Brian Robinson, I think this is a game that's going to be more difficult for him, with the Giants kind of shutting down that rushing attack. On the Giants side of the ball, that rushing attack is where you're going to make your bread and butter. Yes, on the Giants. There we go. So yeah, the Giants definitely need all those O linemen to come back. Let me just pull up the Giants real quick. I know in terms of fantasy players, there wasn't a ton in terms of fantasy injuries that I was paying attention to, but it looks like tackle Tyree Phillips was a full participant. Let's see, Evan Neal was a full participant. Right there, that's a big name. Guard Joshua Nzadu, not sure if I even pronounced that correctly. He didn't practice though. And Shane Lemieux did not practice. It'll be interesting. I think he was a backup though. I'd have to double check that. But in terms of fantasy players coming back, or really being affected by injury, there's nobody out there except for maybe Richie James. Richie James's name just keeps getting cycled around because this Giants passing attack is so difficult to be able to predict. The one guy that I will say has been a guy that I've been talking about for a while is Darius Slayton. He seems like he's finally emerged as the guy in this Giants passing attack. It's just that the Giants passing attack just isn't very good. Now, again, I don't mind throwing Darius Slayton out there. I would start him over a guy like Richie James. I would start him over a guy like Curtis Samuel, I would say, in this matchup, even though Curtis Samuel has had plenty of upside. Um, but I think Darius Slayton, as the number one, has a little bit more game to him. Daniel Jones stays on quarterback roster radar because of his rushing upside. So I don't mind mixing him in if he's a streamable candidate in Superflex. I wouldn't play him over a ton of other guys though. He's again he's that rushing upside. You're hoping to get a little bit more out of him. Could definitely see this game being a low scoring game where the Giants pull out the victory though. All right. Another question thrown in here by Johnny D. Hopefully, some good reports this week. Always hoping for those. CMC and Joku again. That is a big one with him being questionable going into that Houston game. It would definitely be great to see what Njoku and Watson can get going. But in the meantime, we'll see what goes on. And like I said, Zay Jones in that Jacksonville Detroit game, I think is an option just because, like I said, that is the second highest projected total according to the Vegas odds that we're looking at here. All right, moving right along. We're at our 45-minute mark already. Man, I have not hit my 45-minute mark in a while. I think I'm just gonna push it to saying that it's gonna be an hour from now on. All right, Tennessee. Derrick Henry, Derrick Henry, Derrick Henry, and then outside of that, maybe a little more Derrick Henry. I don't like Tannehill. He is a good God. Hold your nose and start him if you absolutely must. I would take the upside of a guy like Daniel Jones over Tannehill. I just man, I would start him over Matt Ryan. I don't know how much that's saying. It's just what was up on my screen. I don't like Tannehill, and I especially don't like him in this Philly matchup. Treylon Burks, same situation. I like Treylon Burks's future. I like Treylon Burks's potential. I don't like him in this Philly matchup. But again, you're going to be playing Derrick Henry. And if Tennessee has any shot of winning this game actually on the field, it's going to be because Derrick Henry is pushing the pile. They're picking up 3, 4, 5 yards at a time. He's getting a handful of chunk runs, and they're limiting the Philly side of the ball, the Philly offensive side of the ball, and what they're able to do with Jalen Hurts, one of the top projections of the week, 22 fantasy points. AJ Brown, 17 fantasy points. Devonta Smith, 13 fantasy points. Miles Sanders, 11 fantasy points. Yeah, like you're going to be playing your Eagles. The Tennessee defense again is a decent run stopping defense, but is a defense that they're going to be dealing with so much and trying to limit what the Eagles do. I think it's going to be extremely difficult for Tennessee to be able to put the clamps on any one guy in this situation, let alone putting the clamps on Brown and Smith or Brown and Sanders. I fully expect one of those three main guys, Brown, Smith, or Sanders, to have a phenomenal 20, 25 point type of game. It'll be a little interesting to see which one is able to do it. And I think I lean the receivers being able to do it more than Miles Sanders because of that Tennessee run stopping defense. And also just the mentality that Tennessee has about winning at the line of scrimmage in a football philosophy mindset. But I would put my money more on Brown and Smith. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if Miles Sanders has another really good game out of this game. All right. Next up, maybe the grossest game of the week, if I haven't used that superlative already, is Denver and Baltimore. They're coming in with the lowest projected over under at 38.5. They're coming in with the fourth. I don't know. I don't feel like counting. One of the lowest projected totals, fantasy totals in the game. And it's just kind of gross all over the place. Lamar Jackson has kind of let people down at numerous times throughout the season, has plenty of potential, But if he's not getting the kind of rushing upside that we know he has the potential to do, it's really hard to play him with a lot of confidence. Also, the fact that his receiving core has just been essentially a walking injury report. Difficult to be able to play. He does have Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews is that number one guy. It looks like Gus Edwards is going to get the go ahead in this game, which is probably it's actually probably going to make things more difficult for fantasy owners. But it does look like Gus is going to be good to go. Um, are you playing him? Probably not. I wouldn't be excited to throw Gus Edwards in there, but if it were, it maybe you take a shot at Gus Edwards versus those Miami running backs. Wouldn't be excited for it. Maybe you take a shot in a game we'll talk about in a little bit. Maybe you take a shot with Gus Edwards over the Los Angeles Rams running backs, something like that. But again, not somebody that I'm really excited to go ahead and force into any type of lineups. Same thing with the wide receivers here: Demarcus Robinson, Devin Duvernay, James Prochet. They're all second fiddle to Mark Andrews, and guys that I'm probably not going to be playing unless I try and like sprinkle in some upside guys into DFS. And honestly, I'd be looking elsewhere for that. So not really much on the Baltimore side of the ball. On the Denver side of the ball, there's even less to get excited about here. Russell Wilson has just been an utter disappointment and failure this year in terms of the Broncos. They're not winning games. They don't look good. They can't score points. It looks like there's some dissension amongst the ranks there. But we did get Broncos country. Let's ride. I guess that's a win. That's definitely not a win. It's a hell of a good joke though. Maybe you can throw out Cortland Sutton in there. Jerry Judy didn't practice on Wednesday, so that's something to keep in mind. But again, if you're any of these players, like yes, you're going out there, you're playing, you're making your paycheck, but your season's pretty much over at this point, and especially with what Russell Wilson's putting on tape, this is kind of gross. Which makes guys like Dolchich, who looked like he could kind of start ascending, he's going to be hampered for a little while. Let's ride the bench. Yes, Joe, absolutely. Let's ride the bench. So many great memes coming out, but we won't get too much into that. I mean, maybe you throw Latavius Murray in there. But man, this is just such a mess. This whole offense, this whole game. Like I said, outside of Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, and maybe Cortland Sutton, there's really nobody that I like. I'm like, hey, let's get them in the lineup. All right, that's way more than enough time that I wanted to spend on them. We already talked about Cleveland and Houston. Up next is the Seattle and Los Angeles Rams game. Bryce Perkins, no, he has some rushing upside. Looked like he had some ability, but then the two turnovers, like it just nothing to really like in this Rams offense. That offensive line, if you didn't see my tweet, I thought it was funny. It was the Tecmo Bowl where they guess the right play and just absolutely eviscerate the offensive line and stuff the play before it even starts. That's what the LA Rams line looks like, which means that you can't really start any of these guys. Maybe Van Jefferson in an absolute pinch, maybe Kyron Williams or Cam Akers again in an absolute pinch. But these are guys that I'm looking elsewhere. And again, they're in that same stratosphere as like Latavius Murray, Gus Edwards, throwing like Kenyon Drake in there. Just utterly impossible to start with any type of confidence to feel good about projecting them anyway moving forward. Out of that group, I'd probably play Latavius Murray out of all of them and just be like, whatever, he should get the most amount of touches and maybe something good happens and bounces the right way for him. On the other side of the ball, Aaron Donald is out of this game, ruled out already, which to me makes Kenneth Walker wheels up. Let's go. Geno Smith, wheels up, let's go. What a comeback story. If he's not on your radar for comeback player of the year, definitely should be. DK Metcalf, despite some really interesting scoring considering his volume, somebody I wish I could give you credit. I apologize, but I saw it on Twitter. Really interesting lack of fantasy scoring considering the volume coming from Metcalf. Flip side, Lockett, decent scoring considering the low volume there. I really like all four of those guys. I'm starting them without any fear now, especially with the linchpin of that Rams defense being already ruled out. I like all of Seattle in this, and the 8-point spread may not be enough. This is something that I could I might throw a crazy bet and just see how far I can get an alternate spread in, maybe go 2-3 scores separating the Seattle Seahawks over the Rams. All right, we already talked about Miami and San Fran. So moving from some pretty gross games to a really exciting game, and that is Kansas City and Cincinnati. This is the highest over under of the week. This game should be penciled in, circled, ready to go for just about everybody. This has playoff implications all over it. This has future face of the NFL written all over it in both Mahomes and Burrow and Jamar Chase. There's so much to love here. You're starting Mahomes, you're starting Burrow, you're starting Travis Kelsey, you're starting Jamar Chase looks like he could be back already. Definitely keep an eye on that. He was a limited participant in practice, so definitely keep an eye on that. If he's there, you're playing him. Joe Mixon, limited participant. Again, keep an eye on that. If he's there, you're playing him. Um, Tyler Boyd gets mixed in here, and also can't say it enough. My boy Hayden Hurst. I told ya, Hayden Hurst. Not only was he on the mental health podathon presented by Fantasy Faceoff, which I've been on for back-to-back years, so technically I've been on the same podcast as Hayden Hurst and tons of other famous peoples, but Hayden Hurst has just been a guy that in this offense he gets left open at times because there's so much to pay attention to, and Joe Burrow has the skill to be able to get it to him. Where I think in the past and some of the other offenses that he's been in, they haven't had those two same things really working for him. So I am all about Hayden Hurst. Samaje Perine, if Mixon can't go, has shown that you can throw him right into your lineup and be perfectly fine with it. On the other side, again, I mentioned Mahomes, mentioned Kelsey. Juju is there. Isaiah Pacheco gets thrown into that mix of like, hey, he could definitely get into that RB2, like top 30 RB range, RB 2.5. I don't mind throwing him in there. NVS, Tony looks like he could be back. Sky Moore, those are all guys that they're the Mecole Hardmans of last year, where you're like, well, somebody's going to score. Let me throw some change at him and see if I can get him in there. Let me throw him into a flex spot, see if I can see if I get lucky with that touchdown. Again, I'm not playing any of those guys right away in managed leagues, but are definitely guys that you can mix in and feel good about. I see Mahomes, Kelsey, Juju, and even Isaiah. I could see all of them getting into the end zone in this game. Same thing with Burrow, Chase. Chase, if he plays, obviously. Higgins, Mixon, if he plays, obviously. I could see them all getting into that as well. All right, final game, and then we're going to sign off. I got to get back to work. We have the Los Angeles Chargers taking on the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders won me some nice money with a walk-off 86-yard run by Josh Jacobs. Thank you, Raiders. Do I expect them to do it again? Absolutely not. He is also in the injury report, so keep an eye on that. He popped with a calf injury, but Josh Jacobs is projected at 21 points. Again, I want to say I told you the beginning of the season, Josh Jacobs was a value where he was getting picked up. Devontae Adams, again, I mean, not necessarily a value where you pick him up because you had to pick him up so early, but Devontae Adams has been doing just fine. Derek Carr is a fine streamable option, even though he doesn't give you any upside in the rushing game. Definitely a guy you can throw out there. And then Mac Hollins and a guy like Foster Moreau, you can kind of mix and match them in and see what you can get in your lineup, but nobody that you really have to force into a lineup. I'm playing Foster Moreau in a couple of leagues because I've had guys like Kyle Pitts that have either been bums or got injured. So, I'm not against throwing a Foster Moreau in there. I think there is a little bit of tempered expectation that goes into that sum, but he's been doing just fine in that tight end position, which is saying it's a coin flip is giving way too much credit to the tight end position. On the other side, you have Austin Eckler once again. Just of all the things I'm saying, I told you that one I got wrong. Austin Eckler is the one thorn in my side of he is that 1% of undrafted free agent running backs that just continue to do amazing things. So shout out to you, Austin Eckler. I'm sure you're listening and wanted to hear that. But there you go. I was wrong and continue to be wrong and probably will continue to be wrong with my agnostic take on Eckler. But he's definitely there, definitely putting in all sorts of work for you. Keep it rolling. Justin Herbert, you're playing him if you have him. Keenan Allen looks like he's back, seems like he's back. I'm nervous. I'm once bitten, twice shy, right? Like it's there. Keenan Allen, I think he's going to be good to go. It looks like they have a full set of healthy wide receivers for this game. Knock on wood. I hope to see it happen, but we'll see what we actually get come game time. But it looks like Keenan Allen, Palmer, and Mike Williams will all be there and healthy, which does limit Gerald Everett's upside a little bit to me. But again, I kind of don't believe they're all going to be healthy. Maybe that's just my being hurt from so many times of like, all right, Keenan Allen, you're in my lineup, let's go. Oh no, never mind, he's out. All right, Mike Williams, oh never mind, he's out also. I think you're probably going to be able to roll Everett, but again, see if you have those wide receivers, see what their health status is. Again, it looks like we have a full slate, a full path of healthy wide receivers there, all the way down to DeAndre Carter. So that could mean just phenomenal things for Herbert and also really bad things for this Las Vegas defense. But again, this is the third highest over under of the week. I could see this game being a complete shootout, especially if Jacob is healthy. I could see this game hitting an over of 60. So, bam, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. We ended awkwardly at the end of the 4 o'clock games, but we did it. We talked through all of the questions that came in there. Please, please, please keep doing that. I love it when you guys jump in, even though we definitely went over my 45-minute mark. My lunch hour is shot, but that's all right. I appreciate you jumping in. Give us a like, hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell button. Appreciate all of that. Find me on Twitter. The name's right there. There it is. The name's right there at FF the At Home Dad. Give the show a follow at the Fantasy Facts. And with that, oh wait, we got one last one. Trev, you could Saved by the Bell, Trev, Big Trev. All right. Thanks, Joe. Enjoy Sunday night as well. Kamara or Rashad, full PPR. Thanks. We talked about it a little bit. I don't think you can sit Kamara, even though the matchup is going to be tough with the Tampa Bay one. And if Fournette is back and healthy, I do think that it is Fournette's backfield to really lead. So assuming you're talking about Rashad White there, I think is the proper assumption there. I'm going to go with the upside and essentially solo play. Lenny seeming like he will play. That's the same thing I'm looking at. Looks like he's going to play, which to me means White is going to get the back seat. Should get more touches than he's gotten in some of those earlier games. I think he's shown that he's capable of that. But I would say, unless Rashad White finds the end zone and Kamara doesn't, I think just the sheer volume that Kamara is going to get makes him a better play over top of Rashad White. I don't see Kamara having he's had a 50-point game in the past. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't even see him as maybe like that 20-25 point game range. I see him more right around that 15-point mark. Can he be a little bit below it? Absolutely. Does he get over it? I don't think by much. Whereas Rashad White, I'd see him being, and again, unless he finds the end zone and Kamara doesn't, Rashad White is probably in that like 5, 6, 7, 8 point range because he'll get a handful of touches, he'll get a handful of receptions, but he's not going to get enough to be able to be a full time to feel good about putting him into your starting lineup, especially if Lenny plays. So there we go, Trev. Hope that answers your question. Again, check out all the stuff the show has to offer. Check out fantasydata.com. With that, I'll catch y'all on the flip side. And then I'm gonna awkwardly click the end broadcast thing. There we go.